So welcome to today's webinar titled Rewind, Rethink, Reset, Understanding Accessibility Through the Lens of a Blind Screen Reader User. So we're thrilled to have you with us today and looking forward to getting started. So today's speakers, by way of introduction, the voice you hear now, I am Dan Sullivan. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at Alliant. And with me, I have Mr. Aaron Page, who's the Vice President of Accessibility at Alliant. And in the photo you can see here, his beautiful guide dog, Jeb, is in the photo with him. Welcome, and thank you for joining, Aaron. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Dan. Thanks for doing this with me. I'm looking forward to this.
And I almost slipped up, and I you will hear me refer to Aaron as AP. He is well known around our space as AP. Very infrequently do we ever refer to him as Aaron Page. So looking forward to today's content. So let's just jump into the agenda real quick. Couple of things that we'll do. Just take a couple of minutes to give sort of a company overview of who Alliant is and what it is that we do. Setting the context around what is accessibility, why accessibility now, why is it an important topic, and what's happening in the marketplace. Then we'll get into talking about assistive technologies, what it is, what it does, how it works, and within that, AP is going to do a screen reader demo for us to give us some real world context as to how assistive technology interacts with digital and document interfaces for individuals that use assistive technologies. We will then cover real quickly key takeaways, and then we will address Q&A. I will say, as we go through the process, you don't have to wait on any questions you may have. You can submit them as we go, and we will certainly take them up at the end. So with that, just wanted to give a quick overview to Alliant. Alliant was a company that was formed in 2022, and it was really brought together through the merging of three separate companies that had existed in the accessibility space for some time. The first being T-Based Communications, which is North America's largest alternative format communications provider. And we work with hundreds and hundreds of organizations, schools and educational institutions. And so in taking print communications and converting those into formats like Braille, reflowed large print, audio communications, etc. Think about bank statements, cable bills, textbooks, things of that nature that need to be converted into formats that individuals that rely on different means of print communications to interact with. Second company that it sort of exists under the Alliant umbrella, it was brought into the fold, is Common Look. A company that's been in place for better than 25 years and really sort of started and really was some of the original inventors of technologies related to making PDF and PDF documents accessible both through software and services. And then the last entity within the group is Accessible 360, which is an organization that's largely been focused on addressing digital interfaces like websites, software, mobile apps, and things of that nature, where we have a team of auditors and software solutions that can scan and assess websites and provide comprehensive overviews insofar as digital interfaces and where they stand relative to accessibility. So really the concept and the idea behind Alliant was to bring these three different entities together to really form the world's first end-to-end fully comprehensive accessibility solution provider. So if you think of ways in which organizations, companies, municipal governments, state governments, entities interact with either customers or with constituents, frankly, print communications, oftentimes there's a lot of digital documents and PDFs as well as web infrastructures, mobile devices, and things of that nature. And I know a lot of organizations are going through this process of sort of what we've referred to as digital transformation, taking customers that have ordinarily consumed communications through print and really move them into more digital environments. However, we recognize and understand that most organizations we work with are communicating with customers or constituents or individuals in all three of those areas. And really the idea is by working with Alliant, we can help you address your accessibility requirements in those three areas. So enough about the commercial on Alliant. Let's get into the meat of today's content. So really, let's start in the idea and the concept. I just want to be really clear with everybody as to what it is that we're looking to accomplish here. And I often use the term for those of us that, or the sort of the phrasing of those that have been in the accessibility space for some time, is we sometimes come to a lot of these conversations or we may work with colleagues or other individuals in our organizations that we're speaking to about accessibility, almost assuming that they know the ABCs, if you will, of the accessibility alphabet. And we almost start at the D, E, and F, if you will. And really the concept of today's demonstration is to really back up, stop the music, and get everybody to start from the same sort of space and understanding truly what accessibility is and how it impacts those individuals that require accessible communications and information. So accessibility, quite simply, is about creating experiences that work for everyone, regardless of ability or forum. And when we say forum, it becomes important to sort of articulate what that means, right? And forum is all of the places that we are present in our day-to-day life, be it within our personal lives, our professional lives, right? It could be a public building, a restaurant, a school, a beach, a park, a website, or a PDF bill that comes to your attention and needs to be paid. Within all of those forums, we have a moral and a legal obligation to ensure that access to these experiences is accessible and usable by all. And in essence, that's kind of what accessibility truly is. So why accessibility now? Why is this in our consciousness? Why is this important? And I can say, dating back to, frankly, back to the ADA, which came into place in 1990, but really going as far back as 2006, when we actually saw one of the first pieces of litigation that was filed around digital accessibility. The reason why it's really come into the forefront more now in 2025 and moving forward are, fourfold, right? The first being enforced mandates. So, whether it's global laws or standards or requirements in areas like in the United States with the Americans with Disabilities Act, or in the European Union with the European Accessibility Act, we're finding that there are legal requirements and mandates that compel us to make certain that all of our content is accessible. Beyond that, right, there's the concepts of your brand and how you want to make certain that you are communicating and presenting and providing information to everyone and really representing to your brand the inclusive nature of the way in which you interact with and communicate with everyone that's a customer or a constituent or someone interested in your information. And as an extension of that, there's the ability to do expanded revenue, right? So if you were a marketing officer and someone could come to you and say, you can do X, Y, or Z, and you can increase your market share by 1, 2, 3, 4%, they would take that deal in a heartbeat. Well, by being able to make your content and your information accessible, you are opening up your opportunities from a commerce perspective to those individuals that may be impaired or impeded from consuming the content and interacting with you. And then, the last point is ensured access, right? Which is it's equitable, it's right, it's the right thing to do, making certain that everyone that exists and interacts with our content and our information is able to do so without barriers is, an important component and something that we really recognize is becoming an imperative in the current marketplace. And the last slide that I'll get into before we'll get into introducing to AP and getting into some of the details here is, one of the other things that we want to talk about and we want to lay some context to, and sort of the ABCs of accessibility, if you will, is some of the legal requirements and some of the legislation and some of the rulemaking that's been in place, which really speaks to the evolution of accessibility. The ADA was a transformative piece of civil rights legislation. It was signed into law in 1990, and quite simply, it prohibited the discrimination against people with disabilities. It requires access and benefits for all. And there's a lot of things that exist within accommodations that you make within under the ADA, which, frankly speaking, help all of us. What often referred to as the curb cut effect. And I often will make reference to this as I may be traveling. And I may be going, I may be at the airport and trying to get to an Uber or a cab, and I've got a big piece of luggage behind me. Well, being able to take that piece of luggage through a curb cut as opposed to over the curb that may exist is, one of those benefits that essentially is there as a result of the ADA, but it provides benefit for everyone. There may be some people that find it easier to use a ramp to get into a space, et cetera. So really the big transformation has taken place, and this really started to happen really as early as 2006. And 1990 is an interesting date, right? I mean, we're talking about almost 35 years that the ADA has been in place. But one of the interesting things about that is the ADA was written and put into law before the digital world became as prominent in our day-to-day lives as it is now. I mean, really, the first commercially registered web domains that were out there came into place around 1993. And it wasn't until about 1999 that there was even any significant distribution of things like the internet and websites. So the ADA was written long before anyone had any consciousness or understanding of just how expansive interacting in digital content was going to be in executing our day-to-day lives. So as we've sort of moved beyond the physical world, right, the ADA still applies to and really extends to other areas of accommodation like websites, mobile applications, PDF documents, all of those things that frankly are designed to be areas of public accommodation. And there's been some rulemaking and there's been some sort of updates or adjustments or, sort of addendums, if you will, to the ADA to make it explicitly clear that websites, uh, textbooks, statements, and electronic documents are areas of public accommodation, and that state, municipal government, healthcare entities, and all of those organizations have a mandate and are required to make those resources accessible by law. It wasn't really until I think 2006 where the first significant piece of litigation was filed relative to websites that were not accessible. And really, from that day moving forward, really the focus on making certain that web content and digital content is accessible has been a huge focus in the United States and is starting to become so in Europe as well. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing here, and we're going to turn the conversation over to an interaction with AP. So AP, I think it might be worthwhile as we get started here, just to give a little bit of context to your background, your life story, and your history, and sort of where you've gotten to the point that now you sit in that chair ready to do a demonstration with a screen reader user, and how that came to be sort of part of your personal identity. So I'll turn it over to you to sort of introduce yourself and give us that high level overview of your background.
Nice. Thanks, Dan. So yeah, I was born with congenital glaucoma. Had pretty good functional vision until I was 22. Actually had a driver's license for a few years there. At the age of 22, I essentially lost my remaining functional vision. Definitely earlier than expected with glaucoma. Thought I would have another 10 or 20 years, but happened in my 20s. Um, so lost my remaining functional vision. And after that, I went to World Services for the Blind, and I spent 6 months there studying, basic Braille, assistive technology, cane travel techniques, cooking, and other independent living skills. And so after 6 months or so at World Services for the Blind, I came back home to Missoula, Montana, and I enrolled as a student at the University of Montana to go after a bachelor's degree. While I was a student at the University of Montana, I actually got a student job working at the IT help desk, just doing things like password resets and helping people connect their devices to the Wi-Fi network and kind of simple IT troubleshooting like that. And while I was a student there, the University of Montana actually received an Office of Civil Rights complaint against it, alleging that the university used inaccessible electronic and information technology. And so the university ended up signing a settlement agreement over that OCR complaint. And as part of its settlement agreement, they were required to establish a procurement accessibility program and an overall accessibility program across the university. And they realized that they've got a blind student working at the IT help desk actually, and so roped me in to help support those efforts, doing things like software accessibility testing, document accessibility testing, workshops and trainings, that type of thing. And so started doing that as a student there at the university. Did that for about four or 5 years at the university, stuck around for a couple years as a staff member afterward, before I saw just an incredible opportunity to join what was known as Accessible 360 at the time as a blind screen reader auditor. So an auditor who focuses exclusively on the accessibility of websites and mobile apps and documents from the perspective of a blind screen reader user. And so joined Accessible 360 as an auditor back in 2018. And in what I like to describe as failing upwards, I, kind of managed to make my way to my current role now as Vice President of Accessibility at Alliant. So that is the short abbreviated story of AP.
Yeah, and it seems like your life story is one that's pretty prominent, pretty consistent, and that the overwhelming majority of individuals on a global basis that ultimately find themselves being legally blind aren't necessarily born that way, but ultimately become blind or at a later point in time. So, is it fair to say, AP, at one point in time you were using computers and web interfaces and digital infrastructures the traditional way through using a mouse and sort of visually consuming the content through a screen?
Absolutely. Yep. Used to be able to use a computer without even using magnification, when I was younger. And so, fully visual navigation using a mouse and using a pointer, that type of thing. And I think it's been something that's been very advantageous for me in my work in accessibility is because I had, 20 plus years of vision. And so I can still conceptualize things in a visual manner, right? So if you
Yep.
describe a web page carousel to me, I can vision that, but knowing how it also works with the screen reader kind of helps me cross that digital divide, so to speak.
So one of the things that you know, even 10, 15 years being in the space, I always sometimes have to pause and take a step backwards with is to really understand how I, in my day-to-day life, both personally and professionally, interact with digital content or documents, et cetera, is, I've got a trackpad here on my laptop. I use my finger. I navigate a cursor around using a visual detection as to where I want my cursor to go. I physically click the screen, and that's how I navigate through. But if I stop for a second and think about if I were to put a blindfold on myself, and you know deactivate my trackpad or a mouse, like thinking about how I'm going to consume and navigate that content. But in essence, that's kind of where you found yourself, right? I mean, you had to make that transition to understanding how to consume that content through the utilization of assistive technology, and in your particular case, a screen reader.
Yeah, it's learning to interact with content in an entirely different way. I like to say that somebody who can see a web page, they interact with it in a two-dimensional manner, right? You might have a close button in the upper right corner and a footer in the bottom and a main navigation menu centered up towards the top. Everything is in two dimensions, up, down, left, and right. But for a screen reader user, in most cases, a screen reader user is interacting with that content really in a one-dimensional manner, right? You move forward and backward through this stream of text provided by the screen reading software. And the order of that text is determined by the code and the accessibility of the content itself. But really it's an entirely different dimension, you might say, of interacting with content on a web page.
And so where I may be using my hand and my mobility to navigate around a page with a mouse or a trackpad, is it fair to say that by being a screen reader user, you replicate that experience with the keyboard and various keyboard commands that you know on the screen reader?
Exactly. Yeah, I don't actually use the trackpad or mouse pointer directly. Everything that I do is through the keyboard, through keyboard shortcuts with the screen reading software. There are some cases where the screen reading software might control the pointer itself, right? The screen
Yep.
reading software may move the pointer to click a button, but I never am actually using the mouse or moving the pointer around myself directly in that way. It's all keyboard and keyboard shortcuts.
And then where I sort of use my vision and my sight to not only consume the content that's on the screen, but also to direct my cursor to the next link or the next area that I want to go to. That experience for you, your ears essentially become the equivalent of my eyes when consuming digital content. Is that a good summation?
Yep, exactly. And it takes time, right, to learn to hear it and understand it and follow it, especially at a fast enough speed that it's practical and it's efficient. And we'll show you that, I think, in the demo coming up.
No, that would be great. So, and let's get into that demo. So, I mean, one of the things that's interesting, and in some of the time I've spent with you, one of the things that I've learned about you is that you fancied yourself a gamer, if you will, good 15, 20 years ago, and did a lot of gaming, and that still continues to be a passion and an interest of yours to this day, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually just playing some Last of Us Part 1 last night.
So it's interesting, right? I mean, like when you learn about these different audio games and things that are happening, my assumption is you're accumulating that information and that content somewhere. So how do you keep up to date? And how do you learn about these things? And how do you consume the information about that topic?
Yeah, so probably the best resource that I have found on that specific topic is a website called audiogames.net. It's mostly an online discussion board for audio gamers to talk about new releases, new updates, tips and tricks and strategies, that type of thing. But they also provide a monthly newsletter. And in their monthly newsletter, they highlight new releases, so new audio and accessible games that have come out, and updates to existing audio games and accessible games that have come out. And so that monthly newsletter, I'm always excited every time I see it pop up in my inbox because it's my go-to place to see what are some of the latest and greatest games that I can try out as an accessibility user.
So could you maybe show us and maybe show the participants today kind of how you do that and how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and steal the screen share here.
Go
Give me
right
one
ahead.
moment.
Month. You
Okay.
have started
So if all has gone well,
audiogames.net
you
month.
should be seeing the audiogames.net monthly digest,
Participants can now see your
and
I
you should
do.
be hearing my screen reader.
I do both.
Perfect. All right. The hard part is done. Okay. So, this is a pretty simple page, right? It's just a newsletter, right? There's not a lot of complex interactive content on there. So I think it makes for kind of a nice, simple example. It's just nice and easy to read and follow along with. And so I, as a screen reader user, or well, actually, I'll start with how a sighted user might approach this. You will probably visually skim through this, right? You'll recognize that there's a title up there at the top. Your eyes will latch on to the various sections like new releases and updates. You'll see the titles of the various individual games that have come out. And maybe if one of those catches your eye or sparks your interest, you'll read the text underneath it. Right. And so that kind of visual skimming can be accomplished by a screen reader user as well via heading navigation. Right. And so headings, if they are properly marked up in a PDF document or on a web page, allow the user of screen reading software to kind of quickly see what all those sections are and to jump between them. So I'll go ahead and do that
the
here.
Audio Games Digest heading level 1 link.
So the Audio Games Digest heading level 1 link.
Audiogames.net monthly digest November 2025 heading level 1.
That's November 2025 edition.
New releases heading level 2.
New releases heading level 2.
Unending Encore left paran Windows right paran heading level 3 link.
Unending Encore, new game for Microsoft Windows.
Peak Parker left paran Windows. Android right paran heading level 3 link.
Peak Parker, a new game for Windows and Android, so both desktop and mobile on that one.
Dreamback Legend left paran Windows right paran heading level 3 link.
Dreamback Legend on Windows. So you might notice that with the headings here, they do a couple of different things. They allow me to navigate around and quickly skim through the page just like a sighted user does using those visual cues, but it also conveys structure to me. You might have heard it say that the names of these individual games are heading level 3s. And that's important because the prior heading level 2
New releases heading level 2.
is new releases, right? And so what that communicates to me is these game titles that are identified as heading level 3s, these are new releases, right? They are subsections of that new releases section there. So that's how I know these are new releases that have come out. And if I wanted to, I can jump to a game. Let's say one catches my
Unending
interest.
Encore left.
So Unending Encore, if I want to read more about that, I can just tell my screen reading software, read me the next paragraph.
Block quote. It's 2025-10-31040 here in Japan. Now, let's begin. Notice: this software is safe to execute.
So you see, it just starts reading out the paragraph text that follows. And so now that I understand the structure, let's say I'm curious about game updates rather than new games. I'm curious if some of the games that I already play have been updated. So I can jump to the next heading too.
Game updates heading level 2.
there's the game update section, right? So new releases was a section and game updates was a section. This type of thing is usually, identified visually by indentation and formatting and size and bolding, that kind of thing. And so now that I'm on the game updates, I can just hit the down arrow.
List of 18 items.
And I hear right away, there's a list of 18 items. So 18 game updates just in the month of November. It's a really active space that not a lot of people know about.
Bullet link table X1, 8, 0.
And I can start to read out the information about the particular game update, right? So nice, simple page, headings, lists, navigation, reading out the paragraph content, and it's such a great way to keep informed about something that for me has very long been a passion. Back before I lost my sight, was huge into Final Fantasy and JRPG style games. Now, as a blind player, I kind of play anything I can and can get my hands on that is accessible.
So
Yep.
one quick thing that's interesting, whether it's at conferences or interacting with some of our customers that rely on assistive technology, particularly in mobile devices, I'll often hear the screen reader reading at a really, really fast pace to the point where I can't understand what's being said. Can you give me a little bit of context as to what that is and what I might be hearing?
Yeah, so a typical screen reader user runs their software anywhere between 300 and 500 words per minute. So for the purposes of this demo, I slowed my speech rate down to about 130 words per minute. So most people would hopefully be able to understand and follow along. I'll turn the speech
Authors-
rate up just right real quick here.
The Audio Games Digest heading level 1, heading level 1 link. The audio game new releases head unending encore block quote. It's 2025-10-31040 here in Japan. Now, let's begin. Notice colon this software is safe to execute. It does not.
So that's it, reading out that same unending encore description that you heard earlier, right? So that is much more akin to what it sounds like for me on a daily basis when I'm responding to Teams messages or emails or reading websites or audit, whatever it might happen to be. I normally run my screen reader at a much faster rate than you're hearing in the initial demo here.
That's interesting. A lot of my colleagues will tell me that I speak too fast and ask me to slow down, and I've never gotten that request from you. That must be the reason why.
Yeah, I need a fast forward button for most folks. You do pretty well though.
That's interesting. Well, why don't we get into, so I think being able to experience an application, and I think one of the things that's important to note here is, this is a relatively basic website, right? Not a lot of complexity to it. So your screen reader interacts and engages with it pretty easily. I'd be intrigued to understand, like, a lot of websites and a lot of digital content are not developed or not built in such a way that make them accessible. And I'd just be intrigued, like, when you encounter something like that and you need to interact with that website, what kind of experience does that provide for you?
Yeah, I can definitely say it can be very frustrating, and the scope can vary. Not all accessibility issues are created equally. Some can just be, kind of minor annoyances, and others can be completely detrimental to the use of the site, completely stop you from using it. I've had experiences where I've gone through a website and found the website to be great, was able to use the website just fine to complete some process or task, at the end of which it gives me a PDF document, and that PDF document is not accessible, right? And so you just never know what you're going to get as a screen reader user when you go to a website, and that can be a pretty frustrating experience at times.
So I think this really gives us a good example of when a screen reader engages with an accessible site and how that experience is. Maybe we could maybe point to or use an example of a site that you might interact with that doesn't give quite as smooth or as accessible an experience. Do we have an example we can share?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and switch my browser tab here.
Official statement.
So I have the
Same
montana.gov website pulled up. And just a quick disclaimer, I myself am from Missoula, Montana. And so this is a website that I'm definitely familiar with and have gone to on many an occasion. Not looking to pick on the state of Montana at all. I absolutely love Montana, love being a resident of Montana. If there's anybody from the state of Montana on this call, would love to be a resource for you, would love to connect. I'm located in Missoula, but happy to travel around and reach out and work with you to help support you however we can, right?
To be,
So
to be fair, AP, I don't think, having looked at a lot of state government sites, I don't think that there's a single state government site that we would pull up that would provide a perfectly clean and beautiful, accessible experience. So
100%. Never seen one myself.
all right, let's see if we can find an example of where
And
inaccessible content kind of impedes your ability to consume the info.
Absolutely. So I've got the Montana website pulled up here, and I want to show you two accessibility issues, really to just kind of highlight how different the impact can potentially be of accessibility issues and why it can be frustrating at times. The web accessibility guidelines don't necessarily do a great job of helping parse and prioritize issues, and you'll see why here. So screen reader users have all kinds of ways to navigate. You saw me jumping around between headings using the H key. I'm going to use the E key here to jump to the next text box on this page.
Search montanamt.gov website, set it.
So when I
Blank.
did that,
Placeholder.
it put my focus on the searchmontana.gov website's text box. It said it's an edit box, ready to go for me to type, right? So everything looks perfectly fine there. What I'm going to do now is hit the down arrow key to move past that text box.
mt.gov search button.
mt.gov search button. And so you might notice that it actually is saying the word button twice here, right? And so what this is a redundant label, you might say. The label here, searchmontana.gov sites, actually has the word button in the accessible name, but that's not necessary, right? The fact that it is marked up as a button tells the screen reader that it is a button. And so because you have the word button in the name and it's marked up as a button, you actually hear it say button twice, right? And so that is arguably a violation of the web content accessibility guidelines. It's similar to why you don't want to say image of at the start of your alt text. The screen reader user already knows it's an image. I already know it's a button. The name doesn't need to tell me that. So does this actually stop me from understanding the purpose of this button though? No, right? Does it stop me from interacting with this button? No, right? But is it arguably a WCAG violation? Yes. And the ironic thing here is that this is the kind of issue that I would absolutely expect to see flagged by something like an automated accessibility scanner, right? This kind of thing is easy to just look at the label. It's marked up as a button. The label says button, flag it, right? But the practical impact is pretty low. If we were auditing the site at Alliant, we would call this a warning level issue. We would flag it. We would say it's a violation, but we would advise it as warning level because the impacts are quite minimal, right? There are bigger fish to fry. So let's move on now to the site's main navigation.
Main site navigation region.
So I jumped to the main navigation landmark, and you might have noticed there was some redundancy there too.
Main site navigation
Main site navigation region. So similar kind of thing there. Inside the navigation
menu
navigation menu,
list of 8 items.
there's a list of 8 items.
Employment button menu collapsed.
Employment button menu collapsed.
Residence button menu collapsed.
Residence button menu collapsed.
Business button menu collapsed.
Business menu collapsed. It's telling me that there are these various menus and that they are currently collapsed. And so the implication to me as a screen reader user is that if I trigger one of these, it's gonna expand and I'm gonna be able to access the options that appear, right? So I'm gonna go and do that.
Residence button menu collapsed.
Here's the residence button. I'm a resident, so I'm gonna expand this menu.
Enter. mt.gov-official.
So I expanded the menu and you heard a kind of ping sound. And so that was my screen reader informing me that I have entered into what is called forms mode. It's kind of a different way of navigating around. But essentially, what I should be able to do now is use the up and down arrow keys to move between the menu items. That's what the screen reading software is expecting. So I'm going to try that. I'm going to hit the down arrow key. So I'm hitting the down arrow key right now and nothing's reading out. I hit the up arrow key and nothing is reading out. And so what's happened here is that this navigation menu has some accessibility issues. It has ARIA on it that could work, but in order for this ARIA to work, it needs extra JavaScript. The JavaScript is missing, so the menu is broken, right? And it creates a keyboard trap. I, as kind of a screen reader power user, I could work my way around this. There are tricks you can use to force the screen reading software back out of forms mode, and then you could reach the links. But really what should happen here is you press enter on the menu expands. You can then use the arrow keys to move between the menu items, and that doesn't work, right? And this is a very, very common thing. I don't know the exact statistic, but probably 80% or more of the audits that we do have some type of accessibility issues in regards to the navigation menu. And it's just because they are somewhat complex with hovers and expanding content, and sometimes you want them to do multiple things. So not uncommon, not super surprised to see it as a problem here on the Montana State website, but definitely an accessibility issue nonetheless. And the ironic thing is that this problem with the navigation menu is something I would not expect to see flagged by an automated scanner, right? So the
Sure.
real barrier, not flagged by automation, the kind of minor incidental thing, the duplicate button label, that would be, right? So
But
it emphasizes.
most
Go ahead.
importantly here, AP, right, is you're a resident of Montana. And as I say, we could do this on any state. If you lived in any state, we would probably find something very similar.
Yep.
But the reality is you are a resident. And I'm looking at the information that's available here. You're a voter, you're a consumer, you are a homeowner, and you pay state income tax. And there's information that's available to all the citizens of Montana that you have a more difficult or challenging means by which to access. Fair statement?
Yeah, absolutely. Navigating around the site would be really tough. I would have to most likely try to use the search box to search and find things that I'm looking for rather than just directly going to that residence menu and selecting what it is that I need. It adds a lot more work.
Well, I appreciate that. And these are not insurmountable things that can be fixed, right? I mean, it's not a overly complicated process. I mean, it takes a little bit of work, but this isn't, to get this site and get this interface to a point where it'd be fully usable and accessible by you is certainly something that's possible and wouldn't be too heavy of a lift, correct?
No, absolutely not. Navigation menus, focusing on that example, we see it all the time. We have pattern articles that have multiple examples of kind of different ways you can approach making a nav menu accessible. So it kind of just comes down to what do you want it to do? In this case, it's just opening a menu. Super, super basic, super easy to fix, I would say.
Excellent. So before we jump over to the second component of this demonstration, which would be documents, and I think we have an interesting example to share. One question that's fairly commonly asked in the Q&A that I don't want to wait to the end to answer. I'm going to answer this question with the assumption that I'm correct, but correct me if I'm wrong, AP. And we've got some very polite webinar attendees today asking what screen reader Mr. Page is using. And my assumption is you're using JAWS. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep. Using the most recent version of JAWS with a real speech synthesizer. So that's why it doesn't have the male robot JAWS voice you might be most accustomed to.
That might be why we're getting so many questions. And on top of that, in your work is sort of a professional in digital accessibility. My assumption would be that you're proficient utilizing other types of screen readers. Is that a fair statement?
Oh yeah, I've got experience working with JAWS, NVDA, VoiceOver on iOS and Mac, TalkBack. I've even played around with Orca on Linux a little bit, but that one is tough.
Excellent. No, I'm glad we were able to do that. So I think a good way of sort of moving forward too, and particularly around some of the state municipal government entities we've been working with. And I think that, one thing that we know is that government tends to have a fairly high dependence on PDFs and documents as a way to both convey information as well as collect information. And there's been a lot of emphasis and focus there. But I thought it would be worthwhile maybe to take a minute and kind of show how the experience is different by using both an inaccessible PDF versus an accessible PDF. And I think you have an example you can share with us. Is that correct?
I sure do, yeah. So I'm going to switch my browser tab
Polling
over
place
here again.
accessibility complaint form.
So the Montana Secretary of State, again, not picking on Montana at all, it's just the fact that I live here. So it makes for, I think, a very good example. They have a polling place accessibility complaint form available on the Secretary of State's website. And so I want to use this as the demo here. And so here's the page where that document is located. And so I'll make my way down to it.
Polling place accessibility complaint form heading level 1.
So I'm going to jump to the heading there, and now I'll just arrow down.
Breadcrumbs navigation region. List of 2 items.
There's the breadcrumb.
Link home / polling place accessibility complaint form. List end. Breadcrumbs navigation region end. Main region. Heading level 2 link polling place accessibility complaint form. Link download polling place accessibility complaint form.
Okay, and here is the link to download the form. So I'm going to trigger that.
Enter. Polling download complete polling place.
And you heard it say download complete, and then it started reading out the file name. So right there, I want to flag something before I switch to the document. And you might be wondering, why didn't that just open in his browser? Right? For most users nowadays, when you click on a link to a PDF, it will open in your browser, right? It will open up it will open up in Firefox or Chrome. If you have Adobe installed, it might use the Adobe plugin, but you don't actually have to go and download the PDF. For a screen reader user, you do, unfortunately. If you want the full benefits of an accessible PDF and you don't want kind of shenanigans pulled by the browsers, adding random tagging and making it different. If you want the actual experience intended by the PDF and the benefits of tagged accessible PDF, you have to open it in Adobe Reader. That is just the nature of it still in 2025 for screen reader users. PDF processors don't handle them consistently. Adobe Reader is the best way to have a consistent experience. So I'm going to switch to this PDF document now. So I'm going to jump back over to Zoom.
Screen sharing meeting control.
And switch the screen
Press
share.
to open.
Bear with me
Pause
for
share
one
left.
moment. You might hear the screen reader yak
Press
while I
to
do
open.
this.
Annotate button. Remote. Press to open. Pause share left.
So I have this PDF pulled up here, and here's the copy of it that I downloaded from the Secretary of State's website. And all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to start at the top of the document, and I'm going to work my way down. So I'm going to hit the down arrow key, and you'll just hear it read out kind of line by line. So down arrow.
To graphic.
First thing I hear out of the gate is it says to graphic, right? So here is an unlabeled image. The image has no alternative text tagged to it. So the screen reader doesn't know what it is, but it knows it's an image. So it's at least telling me there is an image. Where it gets the number 2, I have no idea. You get kind of weird PDF artifacts like that. But suffice it to say, that is an unlabeled image. I'm not sure what that image is as it stands right now.
Polling place accessibility complaint form.
So next I hear polling place accessibility complaint form. So presumably this is the title of the document, but it wasn't identified as a title or as a heading level 1 or anything like that. It just read it out as text. Keep going.
Form to be filed with Election Administrator and Secretary of State.
Form to be filed with the Election Administrator and Secretary of State. That was fine.
Table with 4 columns and 7 rows.
Table with 4 columns and 7 rows. So now we're getting to the part where presumably you're going to fill this out.
Perso and bringen G complainee.
And so the text in this first cell or the first line on the table was kind of read out as gobbledygook. I'll read it again.
Perso and bringen G complainee.
Yeah, I'm not even going to try to say that. What I think it's trying to say is person bringing complaint, right? But the reading order is not clearly tagged in this PDF document. And so the result is that the screen reading software is kind of jumbling up the characters and words, right? It's not sure how to read this out properly. And that's what you hear as a result.
Name : underline, 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 underline.
So now I heard it say name, and then a handful of underlines. So that read out okay.
Mailing address : underline, 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 underline.
Here is mailing address, but you might have noticed it kind of read it out awkwardly again.
Mailing address : underline, underline, underline.
So there's no headings, the images aren't labeled, some text is being read out correctly while other text is not. And you notice all it's saying here is underlines. It's not actually saying edit box or anything like that. So I'm going to try to type my name in.
Name : underline, 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 underline.
So there I'm on name, and I'm just going to type in 2 A's. My name starts with 2 A's.
There are no radio buttons on this page. There are no radio buttons on this page.
And so what it says is there are no radio buttons on this page, right? And the reason why is because this is not a fillable text PDF, fillable text form. And so the screen reader doesn't know that I'm trying to type into the document. So it's instead using the A keyboard shortcut, which moves to radio buttons. So I can't actually type into this document either. So
go ahead. AP, as a voter in the state of Montana, if you did want to complete this form and submit it, what would your option be?
The only thing I could do really would be to print this out and ask somebody to help me fill it out, right? There's no way I could think of that would allow me to fill this thing out kind of independently on my own as a blind user.
That's interesting. All right. So I know one of the things that we did do is we took this PDF and our remediation team took it and made it accessible and was able to provide back to you a document that you would be able to complete and fulfill. Can we maybe show a quick representation of what that looks like?
Yeah.
Here's like.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to switch over to that.
Control W. Polling place accessible.
Okay. So now I am in the accessible version of this PDF. And one thing that you might notice, I apologize, I turned do not disturb on, but Teams is pushing through anyway. So this one thing you might notice right out of the gate is that this document looks pretty much the same. I believe, Dan, you said that there's a little bit of a different coloring in the text boxes, but otherwise, this PDF looks exactly the same as the one that you
Yeah,
saw
the physical look
before.
is the same, but I can see that there are form fields now in here in sort of a blue color, which I assume are fillable forms where you'll be able to submit the information.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so the point I want to make there is just that in most cases, you can't tell if a PDF is accessible by simply looking at it, right? Most of the time, here is kind of an exception because we have form fields, but generally speaking, a tagged PDF and an untagged PDF will look visually the same, right? So you see there's not a lot of change here, but it's going to read out pretty different. So we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to start at the top, hit the down arrow key. So hitting the down arrow key.
The Great Seal of State of Montana graphic.
The Great Seal of the State of Montana graphic. So first thing, that unlabeled image that we heard read out as the number 2 in the other PDF, it now has alternative text, and that alt text was read out by the screen reader, telling me that this is the Great Seal of the State of Montana.
Heading Level 1 Polling Place Accessibility Complaint Form.
Polling place accessibility complaint form, heading level 1. So the title of this is identified now as a heading level 1, but it also tells me this PDF document has headings, right? So I now know as a screen reader user, I can probably use headings to navigate around this thing. So let's try that real quick.
Form to be filed with Election Administrator and Secretary of State heading level 2. Polling place or location of complaint heading level 2. Complaint information heading level 2. Affirmation of complainant heading level 2.
So you can see I can now quickly jump to all the different sections of this document using the heading navigation, which I couldn't do on the previous doc since it had no headings. So I'm going to come back up to that title
Polling
heading.
place accessibility.
And let's arrow down through this now.
Heading level 2 form to be filed with Election Administrator and Secretary of State. Person bringing complaint.
So person bringing complaint, right? That first bit of text that we heard read kind of jumbled up in the earlier PDF now is reading out clearly and correctly by the screen reading software. The tagged reading order has been established, so it's reading out correctly.
Name colon.
There is name.
Person bringing complaint colon full name colon.
Person bringing complaint.
Edit.
Edit. And there's that text box, right? And you heard it actually say edit here rather than a bunch of underlines, right? So it's telling me that as a screen reader user, there is an editable field here that I can type into. So I can tell my screen reader, enter the box.
Enter.
I'm now in this box and I can start typing my name.
A-R-O-N space P-A-G-E.
And you can see my name is now in that text box.
Person bringing complaint colon full name colon edit Aaron Page.
So much improved PDF, right? Images have been tagged, headings have been tagged, reading order is properly established, but probably my favorite part, the form fields are editable and can be filled out. And as a screen reader user, an accessible, fillable PDF like this is an absolute delight because I can fill this thing out entirely on my own. If I can email it for submission, then I don't need any help at all. I just fill it out electronically, email it electronically, and done.
That's amazing. So, I mean, talk about just making the whole and given the fact that it's a complaint about accessible polling locations, which I commend the state of Montana for really giving the disabled community a conduit and a mechanism by which to file or, complaints, maybe even, it could be just a suggestion, but I think being able to bring that experience full circle and make the actual ability to complete that form and submit it fully accessible makes for a much more usable and ultimately accessible experience.
Completely agree.
So AP, I know that our team and we provide software and tools and resources so that individuals can take either new PDFs that they're creating or already created PDFs and make them accessible. But we also have a service and a team, well over 100 full-time folks that do nothing but make inaccessible PDFs accessible. And I know that they did this for us. As for our good friends in the state of Montana, I think for them being used as an example, one of the things that we want to do is we will be providing this fully accessible fillable form version of this PDF over to the folks in Montana, and they can replace the one that's on their site now with this one to provide a more usable experience. So I look forward to getting that over to them. If there's anybody from the state of Montana on this call, we'll be forwarding this along to you. So in the interest of time, and I think we've got about 7 minutes left, I got a couple of slides to cover, AP. This is incredibly helpful, and I would say based on a lot of the questions that are in here, not only is everyone else finding this to be both an eye and ear opening experience, but there's an awful lot of questions. So I think what I want to do is just go to the last couple of slides that we have and see if we can address some Q&A real quick. So with that, make certain my screen is being shared. Yeah. And so some key takeaways as we go through all of this, and sort of my hope is that we gave a little bit more context and that everybody kind of understands the ABCs, right? And I think the most important thing to understand, and my hope is that you understand, is access is a fundamental right, right? It's not just a legal or regulatory obligation, it is, but just making certain that everyone that interacts with content is on a level playing field and has the ability to interact and communicate with that. By taking that form and making it a fillable form and something that's fully accessible and navigable, AP now will be able to complete that form and submit it like I would be able to print it out and fill it out like anyone else, right? I think the other thing that becomes important is oftentimes it's one thing for us to understand and gain context for what this is and the impacts that it has, but oftentimes we find that we have to make that case or explain this to colleagues or other people that we have that either we have a dependency on to get the work done, to allocate funds, or to be outline just how important this is from a priority perspective. Evangelize accessibility. Try and do your best to explain and communicate and to articulate what it is and why it's important. And one of the reasons why we are providing a recorded version of this webinar is you'll be able to share this with colleagues. Allow people to see what you just see, hear what you just heard, to get that context and that understanding. Right. And I think one of the other mistakes a lot of people make is that they just dive in and they start trying to find anything that's inaccessible and start fixing it. I would say, particularly with some of these Title II entities, state, municipal governments, special districts, county governments, you name it. I think one of the things that we always say, we have a phrase we use here called true up, catch up, keep up, meaning scope and understand the size and the scale of all the inaccessible content you have so that you can identify where it is, what's important, and prioritize it, right? And then the concept of catch up is identify the most significant content that's important and start with that. We recognize and understand you have limited time, you have limited resources, you have limited funds. So the idea is, where do we make the most significant impact with the resources that we have? I would humbly submit that making a accessibility complaint form fully accessible would be a high priority document to assess, right? But if you spent a lot of time finding the first inaccessible document you found, then, from a prioritization perspective, really focus on assessing. And then the last point that we make, and I think this is one thing that we find with new individuals that come into the space with an awareness, is we really preach the concept of progress over perfection. The goal and the idea should be to make every day better from an accessible perspective than it was the day before. Perfection is an unattainable goal in this space. Web infrastructures are always evolving and expanding, new releases. But the idea is, let's start with progress over perfection. Let's make a more usable experience. It might not be 100% conformant or 100% in line. I can tell you, whether it's DOJ or HHS regulations or rulemaking, if you've got a plan, it's a well constructed and well communicated plan, and you can demonstrate that you're making movement and you're making progress on that plan, that really goes a long way towards demonstrating your commitment and what you're trying to do. We recognize, particularly with many of these new entrants to the world of accessibility, those in state municipal governments, we recognize that there are a lot of fighting in conflicting prioritizations for funding, right? And the key is, we want to make certain that everybody doesn't get overwhelmed by this and not worry about the lack of 100% perfection, but to really kind of move forward in the right direction. So a couple of things as we kind of move forward. There's a blog that we published, which AP really does a nice job of kind of giving you a blog version of a lot of what we just went through, referred to as Why Accessibility Matters. You can access it through the QR code on the screen. When we send out the recording, we'll also include the link for those individuals that want to be able to access the link. But I think it's something that's really good in order to share. And with that, I'm going to touch base on a few questions that we got, and sort of do the best I can to get through them with the few minutes that we have left. So some folks are asking about PDF accessibility. There are tools and there are resources that I can use in order to make PDFs accessible. Yes, right? Within Common Look, we have our flagship product, Common Look PDF, which is a tool and a resource which gives you all kinds of items and components that enable you to either create new PDFs in a fully accessible format as well as test it, but also remediate or fix existing ones. And we've got a new online version of that that's got a simplified editor based into it, which will enable you to, in an automated fashion, to automatically apply many of the tags, which has often been a manual process, and really can kind of expedite that process. But secondarily, I would say, if you've got a large backlog of PDFs that have been created over the last 15 to 20 years and you can't get to them all, we often find that being able to work with a highly qualified provider that can actually execute that work for you, very similar to what we did with that voting complaint form, that we actually can take those documents you have and literally in just a few days get that turned back to you on a fully accessible, 100% guaranteed compliant basis. So there are a lot of avenues and a lot of places to get to. So we've got 1 minute left, and I do want to get to the last point. And anybody that had a question that was unanswered, we will be certain to get answers back to you, and we'll reach out to you individually. But for anybody that's interested in sort of expanding this conversation or digging into or identifying how we can get in contact with AP, or if our friends there in the state of Montana wanted to come and visit and sit down and have a conversation with you and give you some guidance, by all means, I wanted to provide our contact information. So my email address is dsullivan@alliant.com. AP's email address is apage@alliant.com. And I would tell you, AP is a really good LinkedIn follow. If you want a lot of this content, a lot of information, and some of the things that he is hearing and seeing in the marketplace and talking about, he's really built quite a LinkedIn following. He's mutually followed and follows a lot of the other accessibility leaders out there, and can be a great resource to understand some of the things that are taking place. And every once in a while, he'll also put a nice picture of him and Jeb somewhere around the United States as they go through their travels. So it's a good way to keep tabs on that as well. So we're right at the top of the hour. AP, I can't thank you enough for being vulnerable enough to share your life story and to kind of give us some context. And I think helping all of us get a better understanding to not only see but to hear truly what an accessible experience is, and how an individual that for all intents and purposes had a blindfold put on them at a certain point in life made the transition to continue to be able to interact and operate in a professional environment where 95% of your time is spent on a PC, in a web-based experience consuming content. So really being able to humanize and understand exactly how that happens, I think, is one of the things that I always find to be very beneficial. And I'm hopeful, and based on the feedback that we're getting from the attendees at the webinar, they've been equally thankful for your willingness to do that. So thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you to everybody who attended. We very much appreciate it. This is sort of a record attendance for one of our webinars. And I think it speaks to the significant number of new individuals that have been brought into this topic. And as I say, keep your eyes out or your ears out if you're using assistive technology for an email where we will be sending out a link to a fully accessible version of this webinar, where you'll be able to share it with anyone within your organization or any colleagues. Again, thank you for your time. Really appreciate your willingness to attend and spend an hour with us. And I'm hopeful that this was as beneficial to you as we had hoped for. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.